Lots of people who want to get in on this debate about first cousins marriage. We've had the MP for Dewsbury and Batley, the independent MP Iqbal Mohamed, saying that he thinks that first cousin marriage should continue to be allowed because it's good for the financial position of some families, and it strengthens family bonds. It certainly does if you're marrying your cousin. Well, Richard Holden, he's a Conservative MP for Basildon and Billericay. He's also on the Conservative front bench. He has been trying to outlaw this, and this is what he said in Parliament today.
As MPs, we should be more than glorified social workers, seeking to help constituents through the bureaucracy and through the system. We have a role in changing things for the better too. Henry VIII changed the law on cousin marriage to suit his own personal interests and pursuits. We should act in the national interest. Of course, this is about finding a balance. I've outlined for health, for freedom, especially the freedom of women, and for the cohesion of our society. For me, these things tip the balance against those personal freedoms.
So most MPs are for what Richard Holden is saying. Yeah, first cousin marriage, not a good thing, not a good idea. Well, Iqbal Mohamed, he's the independent MP for Dewsbury and Batley. This is what he's been saying about it. He is for the law staying as it is and first cousins continuing to be allowed to marry. This is what Iqbal Mohamed has been saying in the House of Commons this afternoon.
There are documented health risks with first cousin marriage, and I agree this is an issue. This is an issue that needs greater awareness on. Virginity testing, forced marriages, and the freedom of women must be forced marriage must be prevented, and the freedom of women must be protected at all times. However, the way to redress this is not to empower the state to ban adults from marrying each other, not least because I don't think it would be effective or enforceable. Instead, the matter needs to be approached as a health awareness issue and a cultural issue where women are being forced against their will.
I don't know about you, but when someone says in the House of Commons, the freedom of women must be protected at all times, however, that doesn't really endear me to them. Let's talk to Dr. Laurence Buckman. He's former chairman of the British Medical Association GPs Committee. He's a North London GP. Laurence, first cousin marriages, it's just not a good idea, is it?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
A normal couple, not cousin marriages, they have a 2 to 3% chance of having some problem with the baby. A marriage where two cousins marry or other very close relatives, there's a 5 to 6% chance. So that's a significant risk that something will go wrong, whether that's genetic or structural, like a piece of the body doesn't work properly or quite the way it should. Those are risks that I think are best avoided.
Have you seen the effects of cousins marrying and their children having these defects in your work yourself, or do you have colleagues who have? How have they dealt with that?
I personally haven't had a case, but I have many colleagues who've had cases, and it's sporadic because, of course, cousin marriage is not very common. So when you meet it, you hope that nothing will go wrong with the baby, and generally speaking, it doesn't. But every so often, somebody has a baby with something physically wrong with them, which normally means a cleft lip, a heart defect, some other structural fault, or, rather less likely, a genetic defect, because two people with an abnormal gene who are related to each other have married each other and produced a child who is abnormal. There's something wrong with them genetically. But most of the people I've heard of have been structural problems rather than genetic ones.
It must be very difficult for medical professionals such as yourself and your friends and colleagues to deal with the cultural issues around this as well as the medical issues.
I think most doctors try to steer very clear of cultural issues. Our job is to give medical advice, not to tell people how to engineer their culture. And that can be very difficult because, of course, you're straying into areas that are very personal and very important. And I don't think we're in a position to tell people how they should behave. What we can do is tell them what the risk is of a cousin marriage. And we know what the risks are, they're well reported. And you just have to tell people what they are. And then what they do is up to them. And we have to cope with that in the event that something does go wrong.
So from what I'm hearing from you, and I don't put words in your mouth, Laurence, but it appears to me that you're against outlawing this, but actually just making people more aware of the risks.
I'm never very keen on legislating for relationships. I think it's much better to explain to people why the consequences of what they're doing may be an increased risk of having an abnormal child. If the couple still want to go ahead, I think our job is to be present for them in the event that we're needed. I'm not very enthusiastic for legislation as opposed to giving pretty clear medical advice on why I don't think it's a great idea.
OK, Laurence, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you. That's Dr. Laurence Buckman there, former chairman of the British Medical Association GPs Committee. He is a GP himself and works in North London.